Hi everyone. I just got off Skype with Matt from Langdon Coffee Merchants UK office. We were supposed to have a public cupping in London right now, but since everything is shut, he just took questions from different roasters he works with, asked them to me, and I answered them on a Skype call. So that's what this video is about.
My name is Carl. I'm the director of Cedro Alto. My former career was in import-export consulting and later on rural development. A lot of the economics of these rural agricultural supply chains and how to make them work better for smallholder producers and of whatever in some of the more marginalized and war-torn parts of Latin America. Later on, I saw coffee as kind of a low-hanging fruit because people kind of care where it comes from already. Not like apples, where we really have quite a long way to go with traceability and such. Uh, so I started working with some coffee farmers that I knew, who I realized were producing very high-quality coffee, but they had no access to specialty markets that were willing to pay them more than the street price, which doesn't take into account quality at all. So they were quite discouraged, and I thought, well, I'll help these guys out. I know that there are some roasters that are paying good prices for good quality, so all I have to do is translate some emails, and direct trade will ensue, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Took me a while, but I figured out that was not viable at all. Uh, Smallholder producers were not in a position to take on that risk, to finance the time required to conduct export and import and distribution, and really just all the nuts and bolts of how to make it work, administration of dry milling and marketing of green coffee, how it should be presented. Just really no one was in a position to do it. So I was taking on more and more of these little jobs. And, oh,
Mhm.
you don't know how to make a website? Yeah, I'll do that for you.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't have any money to wait, to buy food while this stuff starts sailing across the world. Ah, don't worry about it. I got you.
Yeah.
And then just very fast realized I was dedicating a lot more time to that than my real job, which was consulting at the time. It took a while, but we eventually landed on this collective structure
Mhm.
so that all these individual producers could put together their individually small scale in order to work at a competitive scale, to be able to fill up full containers between all of us, not just every man for themselves, and share different resources such as my time and the other employees' time, which, I mean, no one that's making 20 bags a year could afford to hire a full-time admin to run their paperwork and distribution logistics and
Mhm.
invoicing and accounts receivable and all this. But between 150, it works all right.
Yeah.
Marketing efforts and such. So that's basically how this whole thing comes together.
Something you said to me, which I found interesting, was when you were you're kind of set up as to allow the farmers to be farmers, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I found that interesting.
exactly. I mean, not spend their time traveling to the city in a bus to sign an anti-narcotics police form every time they want to send coffee out. So yeah, we're dividing up labor, but the goal is so that all these individual farmers can be running their own international supply chains without having to take on the risk and do all the little jobs involved with exporting 20 bags by airplane, which I know a lot of people are doing.
Yeah.
So trying to avoid that in order to keep prices competitive, and keep the entire supply chain efficient, because really the end goal is to provide each individual producer with a stable supply chain and as much money in their pockets at the end of it as possible. So if they're paying $2 a kilo air freight, that's not in the best interest of their
Mhm.
bottom line,
Mhm.
which is why we decided to structure it this way versus that way.
Mhm. And could you kind of describe that structure for me? As practical clinical terms as you like.
Sure, we'll give that a try. So
I know it's
all
probably more complicated than that.
yeah, the farmers are everywhere. They're all over the country, in mostly in very far flung areas. Some of them work with local municipal co-ops. Others don't. Um, and as a collective, the organization's job is to channel those coffees into specialty markets and make sure that they end up at roasters who are appreciating them and compensating farmers for cup quality. What does that actually look like? We pre-finance the harvest, so farmer brings in 100 kilos of parchment or whatever to the small town where there's a scale. They weigh it. We make sure they get paid every week, every time that they're bringing in coffee, because they operate on very tight cash flow structures. We're going to bring all those coffees not to one warehouse. We don't have a place where we stick all these. Rather, it's always just in time. Every time the farmer calls me, hey, I've got 500 kilos. Okay, put them in this warehouse in this town. And then at the same time, I'm having somebody pull samples, send them to our lab, brewing these samples, immediately sending them somewhere else to try to get that coffee sold as it's still being put together. Where we're always receiving, always financing coffee that's going to be scattered all over the country, waiting for purchase orders to come in. Some of that we're sending to the U.S. where we have our own import company and distribute to roasters, or going somewhere else to Langdons in the UK and Australia, and yet trying to make sure these micro lots are not falling through the cracks. And we handle the dry milling, have the bags printed up, figure out who this is going to, what we need on these bags, how many bags we're going to have of each micro lot. This farmer wants his name this way, and all the export logistics, send these to the port, all the paperwork and things, we handle that on behalf of producers, because really it's like, I've not sat down and like with a timer, but I've estimated it takes about 80 hours or 80 work hours to handle just the paperwork of one export shipment. So you could spend 2 weeks sending a container, 3 containers, or 10 bags.
Yeah. I
And
think
then,
I think that's quite an interesting parallel to I was talking to David Train in Australia, and we were discussing how you can, especially if we kind of import export green coffee, you can walk into it thinking you're I don't know, glamorous is the wrong word, but it's all one thing when it actually is a lot of technical, a lot of detail, a lot of paperwork, a lot of admin is involved, and it's incredibly time consuming.
yeah, like, oh, well, we've got to get this truck to take this to the port. It's here, and then we've got to get the guia de tránsito, like a paper that the FNC gives us to say we're allowed to be on the road with coffee. Ah, they haven't gotten our guia de tránsito. Well, the trucker's waiting, and he's charging me $100 an hour to sit there. Okay. Well, we've got well, like the last time when we sent to you all, the truck got there. Ah, the truck is too small. What do you mean the truck is too small? Why'd you send me a small truck? Oh, send the truck back. Well, but you got to pay the driver. What do you mean I got to pay the driver? He came in a truck that wasn't big enough. And just like constantly, this kind of fights and struggles that go on that you wouldn't really expect. And you would think that you send a couple of containers and you get used to how this works, but no, there are always surprises.
Yeah. It's really a miracle that any coffee ever gets anywhere, really, isn't it?
It really is.
Well, not a miracle, a miracle of human endeavor, maybe. One of the coffees that's coming, that's here now with us, is the Passiflora Traceable Micro Regional. I'm delighted with the way it tastes, both kind of on arrival and pre-ship. But I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more, kind of about what traceable micro regional kind of means as a term, and because I'd never heard it before until you mentioned it to me when we first started speaking.
There's a good reason for that. It's because I
Because you
made it
coined
up.
it. Yeah. Sounds really good.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it arrived and isn't tasting totally baggy. That's always a relief. Uh, and basically, what this means is, I mean, this is a coffee that's mixed of the crops of different farms. So we call this a regional, right? But a regional could be one co-op. It could be 10 producers that got together and made it. It could be whatever coffee the exporter could find that was cheap from one area. It could be just whatever coffee from the entire country. This is like Excelso, UGQ, whatever. This is a regional. But I thought this is really not that. This is quite different from your Medellin, Excelso, or whatever. Uh, so this is a very small, confined area where all these producers are coming from. This is the Montalvo Vereda, one basically one mountainside of one municipality of one department of Colombia. And this is a group of about 20 farmers, and that are all farming basically the same way. They're all the members of the Agproducem Association, who's invested a lot of time and effort in training these farmers to do their processing a certain way, and that's why the profile is how it is. And I wanted to highlight that versus just blend it out, because honestly, we can't sell coffees for a high enough price to make it worth keeping them all separate from all other lots if they're not scoring 86. And I'd love to tell farmers that are making 84 that are doing a very good job that this is wonderful, let's put your name on this bag. But unfortunately, because of all this paper, all of this sampling and wrangling of lots and keeping track of them throughout the supply chain, all that is admin cost, and that adds to the price per pound. That adds to our overhead per pound that we're sending out. And if we're not at a certain level, which by my calculation is 86, that I can sell to a roaster at 350 per pound or USD per pound or more, it's not worth it. I can't do it. Uh, so kind of our middle ground, which took me like a full year thinking about to come up with, was just to keep these smaller groups of farmers mixed but separate from all other areas, all other lots from other areas, and these are not very large lots. And of course, I mean, you can go to any association, any co-op in any country that's producing coffee and get just their coffee and call it a traceable micro-regional. I mean, there's nothing super unique about this. This is just a group we've formed. What I think is a bit different is the way that we're managing the transparency information behind that. Since we got started, the idea was to move microlots to highlight each farmer's work, to make sure that everyone in the supply chain understands what the farmer's making, that the farmer is not getting ripped off. So how do you do this with regionals? Everybody has to use regionals. Nobody's going to be using 100% 86-point microlots in their house espresso blend. Not nobody. I'm sure there's somebody out there, and that's great. But for the most part, I realized that with the roasters we work with in the US, most of them were buying like maybe 10 bags of microlots from us, and then 6 times as many Colombian regionals from someone else. I figured something that has to exist. So we might as well just do this in the most transparent way possible. And I'd gotten a lot of feedback from these roasters saying that, yeah, this transparency thing, it's cool, but we've got to use regionals. And there is no transparency. And I thought, oh, why couldn't there be? And I get why there isn't in a lot of cases, just the way these supply chains run. We got collectors, we got intermediaries, consolidators, and everything gets lost in the sauce because it's not somebody that's just sitting there writing all this down. Because again, cost, efficiency. You wouldn't be able to have sub $2 per pound 85-point regionals if somebody were taking care of all that. So in this case, because we know all the producers that are contributing to these regional lots, because we work closely with the associations that they're members of, we're able to get these numbers without a problem. We know this farmer put in 20 kilos, this farmer put in 180 kilos, and we know what each of those farmers is earning for parchment, and we know what we're financing to them for that parchment and green coffee, and how the money's divided up in that association. So we're able to give you, have 5 bags of this full container lot, and then here's this printout. I don't know which 5 bags you got and which farmers those were from. The idea is that they're all blended perfectly.
Yeah.
But we've got this printout. Here's 20 farmers. Here's how many kilos each one put in and how much each one is earning. Yeah, ideally, this is put into context so we know what that means for that farmer's family and how to interpret it in one's own context, currency and units. But yeah, that's how these traceable micro regionals are working so far, and so far so good.
Yeah, they're really good. I love the Passiflora that we have. Definitely impressed with it. Maybe I'd like just to briefly go over. So the you mentioned the kind of transparency sheets you have. Maybe if you could talk through, I can see the one in my mind's eye now. If you could talk through them.
So in this transparency report, we have a farm gate price, FOB price, and for a comparison, the commodity FOB price. Of course, I didn't go to a farm and hand £3 sterling to this farmer for 1 kilo of green coffee. So these numbers are derivative. We do have all the data behind them. I have a massive spreadsheet that probably I'm the only person in the world can understand. But all that data is available if anybody really wants to dig into this. But basically, we have Colombian pesos per carga or per unit of dry parchment coffee, and then we arrive to pound sterling per kilo of green coffee based on the exchange rate on the day that the farmer is sending us this dry parchment, and based on the parchment to green coffee yield factor. So how many kilos of dry parchment does it take to create one 70-kilo bag of green coffee? About 78% is the conversion we normally see, but it can vary quite a lot. So that's how we're getting this farm gate price. I just finished another video on farm gate price that I'll be posting on YouTube today to get down to really what's meant, what context is behind that, because that's another issue altogether. And then the FOB price is just, this is what we put on the invoice. So this includes all the costs of running that supply chain. So financing the time that it took that farmer to put together that full lot, because they're harvesting little by little, small farms. And the idea is to take their entire harvest. So these are almost the entire, in most of these cases, the micro lots are the entire or almost the entire fly crop of these very small farms. And yeah, the FOB price will include the dry milling, the bag printing, the grain pros, the 3 different trucks we had to send to send for it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think it's important to take a look at what's below here, which is really what, in the context for that family, what that means to them. So we've calculated a production cost based on surveys we've done with the farmers that make up the Cedro Alto collective in their different parts of the country. And these vary by farm. They're a little bit different every time, especially that we're expressing these in pound sterling. It's going to be different every day.
Yeah.
But just, for reference, about what it costs these farmers to create enough parchment to create 1 kilo of export grade green coffee versus their farm gate price. So you can see what's their profit margin. And then based on the average farm size, not each individual farm size, we can see here their approximate family yearly income for all the coffee they're going to be taking that year. And this includes the percentage of that harvest that is going to be specialty grade and the inevitable percentage that's not going to be. And then we can compare this to the commodity market. For the last year, a lot of times the commodity market has been paying less than what it costs them to produce. Right now, no. Well, at this snapshot in time, a couple of months ago, no, they were making 0.14 per kilo. So better than it was a while back, but you can just see the difference in family income. The bottom line, when all is said and done, 801 pounds versus 8,375.
I think what I like about that, and kind of, and a lot of what you're doing is, and what you said to me is that it's kind of, I don't know. I don't feel like you're claiming to have the answer or to be a silver bullet. You know what I mean? Right? And things like this. And yet the detail and the numbers are there, and it's all very practical. And that's kind of what I first drew me to what you were talking about.
Yes, I mean this is what it is. Maybe
Yeah,
time, maybe it's not. Maybe I mean if somebody wants to come along and pay these farmers more than 312, then that's even better.
yeah.
But I think what's not shown on this transparency report, that's not shown on any transparency report that I've seen, or how you would even express it. But I think is really important is with what consistency is whatever intermediary or co-op or collective actor receiving this parchment from these farmers. Because I mean, what we see a lot and what's really easy is get off a plane, go to a co-op, go to their cupping table. I love this. It's great.
Mhm.
How many kilos are there? Oh, 1,000 or 500 or whatever it is. Okay, I'll give you 5 pounds per kilo. And then it goes on the transparency report, and this is what it is. Look, this is really great.
Yeah.
But that those 500 kilos, what percentage of the farmer's yearly production was that? Or
Yeah.
what percentage of the farmer's yearly specialty production was that? Maybe 10%,
Mhm.
maybe 20%, maybe 40, I don't know. Yeah, that one transaction was excellent. And if that farmer is able to sell it to 8 individuals like this buyer, then that's great. But in almost zero cases, that's true. Uh, Going out producing coffee and then trying to find somebody who will buy it, and no, I don't want 2,000 kilos. I only want 1,500. So just send me those because that's what I want. If you're in, working with a grain pro distributor or something, that's fine. That's how that works. But these farmers are in a really vulnerable position in the supply chain, and without having that consistency, I mean, selling 10% of their harvest for an insane price is welcome, but it's not going to change the way that they're managing their family finances, and not going to lead to an improved standard of living for that family, because they're enduring just as much risk as they always have, and inevitably they're going to sell into the commodity market, or they're vulnerable to the commercial ebbs and flows.
Yeah, sure.
So in this case, what's quite different is that they have a commitment from Cedro Alto to be able to send all of the projected specialty volume that they're producing one harvest
Mhm.
into the specialty supply chain and earn a fixed price that they're aware of before the harvest. So they don't have risk at all when they're going into a harvest and deciding whether they're going to cut corners in processing to cut costs, or
Yep.
if they're going to invest in much more expensive specialty processing, cherry selection, for example, like the amount of hourly wages and daily wages they have to pay just really increases their cost of production per kilo of dry parchment quite significantly. And if they're not going to decide to make that investment, uh, if chances are they're only going to sell 10% into the specialty market anyway.
Yeah.
So from their end, that's by far the biggest difference between working with a collective versus just trying to sell.
Yeah. Great. Given the kind of vertical integration model that you have, what what does Cedro Alto as a central organization ask of its collective members?
As far as producing good quality, we want them to produce good quality, but that's
Hmm.
not what we're after, because, like I probably mentioned, we're the opposite of coffee hunters.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
they're producing the quality that they choose to produce. We're supporting their efforts, supporting them in wet milling experiments and infrastructure improvements. But essentially, they produce the quality that they want to. And if it's at a certain differentiated level that it will be wasted in the commodity channel, then we're here to help them channel it somewhere else.
Hmm.
Uh, so we're not asking them, you've got to produce 87. If
Uh-huh.
you produce 87 and you want to market for it, we're here. If you
Gotcha.
don't want to, if you don't feel like this, or you're tired of it, you rather just sell in the commodity market, that's fine. I don't care.
Hmm.
Uh, so they're doing what they're doing. We're asking them basically just to be organized with how they're producing and how their supply chain is going. With drying, we do get a little bit more involved because that can just be a ticking time bomb that we're all vulnerable to if we're not careful. And really just to make sure that we're in the loop, that we're getting ready for a harvest, so we're calling all the farmers, all 150 right now, to ask how many kilos are you expecting to have by the end of April? How many kilos are you expecting to have by the end of May, so that we can start coordinating to make sure that we have cash when they're bringing in parchment.
Gotcha.
Because everything is slow until it's really fast.
Yeah. That's what I was
Uh,
thinking earlier when you were talking about how things are coming in and things are going out at the same time. It seems it almost echoes a cafe, a busy rush. We used to say
uh-huh.
when I was first started working in cafes, we used to say sometimes it felt like people just gathered around the corner of the cafe and waited until there was about 50 of them, and then all came in at the same time. So
Yeah,
so I definitely see some parallels with that.
yeah, definitely same way here.
The kind of current drive in this part of the world for sustainability and ecological thought processes, is that translated over to the farmers, or was that always been on their mind? Has that always been something?
Yeah, right. Good catch. My mind was all logistics because that's what I'm dealing with today.
Uh,
But yeah, there are certain qualifications to, as a farmer, be accepted into the program to begin with, uh, and those are three main environmental criteria, which is not like organic certified. There's no certification application and waiting period or anything. There's no cost involved. It's quite informal. A lot of the farmers we're working with do have their organic certification, which we really appreciate. But it's not a requirement because just logistically, depending on the co-op infrastructure that's available in some areas, it's just not viable for a lot of farmers, as well as fertilizers and soil conditioners. These are not prohibited under our environmental criteria. We'd love for everyone to be using organic certified inputs, but the fact is they're not available everywhere to everyone. And when they are, they're quite a lot more expensive in many cases. So first is the inputs that farmers are using. Uh, the prohibition of all toxic pesticides. I know toxic is a funny word, so interpret that how you like. Harmful pesticides, if I can say it that way, but this does not prohibit synthetic soil conditioners. Coffee takes nitrogen out of the soil. If nobody's putting it back in, coffee won't be able to grow there anymore. That's a deterioration of soil quality. And if we're taking something out, we have to be putting it back.
uh,
It'd be great if this was using elements that are available locally, but the fact is we're not there yet. So for the time being, as we're working on planting leguminous trees that are going to automatically replenish nitrogen, it's got to be put back in. So we understand that. The second is water use. Water use is also a funny word because does water get used up? What does it mean to actually use it? It doesn't go away.
doesn't go
Uh,
ahead, does it?
like in most farms, we're very lucky here that there are natural springs just everywhere throughout the Colombian Andes. So there are always streams passing through. There are springs in quite a lot of the farms, and that water is passing through this farm and going somewhere else. So if you were to capture it and put it through your wet mill before it goes down the hill the rest of the way, did you use it? It's not gone, it's still going down the hill.
Yeah.
So what we really focus on is the quality of that water and how we're adulterating it in that process. One of the I don't know how you quantify this, but one of the very important environmental risks in coffee processing, especially washed coffee, is honey water. So the water is being used as cherries are being depulped. In a lot of cases, sometimes there are dry depulpers, but that coffee is going into a tank. It's fermenting. The fruit goo, if I can put it that way, is
Great, I
is
like
being
it.
eaten by the bacteria and yeast and essentially dissolving. At a certain point, we're going to cut off fermentation. How do you cut it off? You flood it. So you fill this tank with water. You're going to be mixing around this coffee to get the fruit goo pieces off of that wet parchment that's in there. And then you'll see the water turns like a gray brown, just because of all that fruit matter, that organic matter that's now in that water. Then we're going to drain out that water. And while it is fermented, it's still very acidic. It hasn't fermented completely back down to a neutral level of acidity. So it's really important to taking that water and putting this somewhere else. There are different systems, but like some kind of a tank to ferment this completely before it's then being sent back down its path. So it needs to be filtered for fruit matter, and then its acidity needs to be neutralized, or else you're going to end up acidifying land and waterways further downstream, which comes with a whole other set of environmental problems. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, that's the second one. The third one is the Cedro Alto members need to be practicing agroforestry. So this is quote unquote shade grown coffee. But not any kind of shade like bananas and plantains, which are not native to Latin America and don't add much to native biodiversity. Rather, native hardwood shade trees, because all of this land where we now have coffee was at one time a forest. Mm-hmm. The forests have been, in a lot of cases, taken down completely, and in other cases, more responsibly, just the first levels being cut down and coffee trees have been placed in there. Uh-huh. Here in Colombia anymore, that's very, very rare. It's on our transparency report here, but something like 4% of Colombian coffee is grown under native hardwood shade. Just because that was completely done away with. Green revolution, we need to get more out of this land so that farmers don't start planting cannabis and coca. Yep. Was somebody's idea at one point in history. And then the Roya came, so we needed to get rid of all these caturras and típicas and these varietals that are susceptible to Roya. So let's put in something that's rust resistant like Castillo, like less so Catimorti and these Robusta Arabica hybrids that endure and require more sunlight. I can get into it another point, but there was a very strong incentive across the board in Colombian coffee to cut down shade trees, to plant many, many more coffee trees per hectare to be able to get more coffee out of the land here. But very sadly, we've lost an incredible amount of native biodiversity, which had a lot of consequences for the earth, for the region, and all the people that are living here, for all the animals and organisms that are inhabiting these areas, as well as for the farm itself. We've been doing a lot of research lately about the effect of native hardwood shade trees in coffee plots, and conventional wisdom out in the coffee lands, especially here in the Jicaretero where we are, is that this is disorganized. So you've got all the trees around. What is all this? We want these neat little rows like Brazil style. This is what we're after. This is modern. This is technified. However, we're finding that as far as the farmer's bottom line and several aspects of quality of life and economic stability, they're actually much better off with the presence of responsibly managed shade. So this is a requirement. I mean, for all the collective members, we have 79% that already practice native diverse shade agroforestry, 21% that still have partial shade. We're working on getting those up to 100%, as well as any farmer that's interested in implementing these techniques. We're supporting that way with technical assistance, as well as actually buying them the trees to be planting. And I mean, this is tough because we're having to say no to a lot of really good coffees because they just don't comply with these three environmental standards, which we feel are quite important. And if if 150 farmers are doing it and they're happy, it's possible.
Do you feel those those kind of tenets of what you those three tenets that you just mentioned, they're in place for the benefits of the farmers, for sustainability in general, both financially and ecologically. Would that be a fair assessment of that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are other things that we could be doing, but we've not found quite as solid a case for them. It's kind of a no-brainer to not use harmful pesticides because this is the planet, this is the health of your farm, this is the health of the family and people that are working here. So if it's in any way possible to avoid them, then why wouldn't we?
One thing obviously I'm talking to you from a point of working with Langdon coffee merchants here in the UK. Um, how kind of how does partnering with someone like a Langdon coffee merchants kind of benefit yourselves, or does
Uh,
it?
well, I think so. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Really, like I mentioned, we're trying to structure this supply chain as vertically as possible, but also letting everyone do what they're best at, do what they're best set up to do. As an organization at this point, we're able to turn over parchment a few times a year. But if we were converting this parchment to green coffee, sending this to the UK, knocking on roasters' doors, sending out samples here and there, taking forward contracts and letting them be drawn down, just from a cash flow standpoint, we would be stopped. We can't operate that way at this point because we need to keep the wheels turning for farmers because they're always coming at us with more parchment. I mean, we could buy it all and send it to the UK, but we'd be able to work with like 10 farmers.
Hmm. Yeah.
And in order to work with 150, we need to be essentially turning over cash a lot faster to be able to offer pre-financing to more farmers. And if Langdons and global traders are in a position to efficiently manage their supply chains, and we were able to establish a certain kind of relationship that we're comfortable with the ways that our project and these coffees and families are being represented, then if you all can do it more efficiently than us, then we're more than happy
Yeah.
to have your support.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned that the families and the farmers themselves. Um, I don't want to ignore these kind of crazy times we're living through right now. So obviously um, the during a economic blips, well, bit more than a blip now. It's the lower income people like the farmers and whatnot who tend to bear the brunt of it. What kind of if there's is there anything really practical and really practical that consumers and roasters and people like Langdon coffee merchants can do in order to help those guys, also to help yourselves as well, as an organization trying to do good?
This is a tough one.
Hmm.
I think I'd start at the consumer level because this is the most impactful
Yeah.
way that someone could support us as well as the entire supply chain. Um, if someone's maybe a few times per week buying a nice pour over, but then for their home, they're just going to Tesco or whatever, buying up an enormous bag of whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, that's one small change that wouldn't really affect someone's family
Yeah,
economy.
yeah,
Mind just instead of buying those two or three pour overs because you can't anymore, maybe buy something you're going to enjoy a little bit more at home.
yeah.
Uh,
It's interesting.
Ideally from a local roaster, and really that's it because just that very simple act of continuing to support that local roaster whose coffee you already enjoy, that impact is going to reverberate back through the entire supply chain to the farmer.
Mhm.
Um, as far as the rest of the supply chain actors, I mean, this is a really sensitive topic in a really
Yeah.
sensitive time. But I suppose what we all need to do is try to keep a cool head
Uh-huh.
as much as possible to really figure out based on an uncertain outlook, what's the maximum amount of risk we can continue to endure?
Do you think um, uh, quality will be um, it's lessened, it's dampened slightly now over here, but the kind of the the constant drive for incredibly high end coffees, you know, the kind of fanboys and girls of the famous varieties and whatnot, is that going to have to change? Is that going to have to be looked at? Is expectations going to have to be lowered this side of the chain?
I don't really think so.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think the quality from this harvest is going to be necessarily affected. One risk that we're experiencing here is labor. So pickers, a good portion of pickers are traveling all around the country based on where there's a harvest. And because intermunicipal travel is prohibited right now, they're not arriving to the areas where harvesting needs to be done. And without that additional foreign labor, local labor is in short supply. I haven't heard any stories yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if, based on that low supply of labor and constant demand, that prices end up increasing. So we might see lower quality picking. We might see, in order to have very high quality picking, much higher production cost.
Hmm.
So that this is a possibility. But supposing that this gets sorted out while we're still like less than 10% into the harvest, I wouldn't expect quality to suffer too much. I'm actually more worried about the other side, that we know for a fact that quite a lot of coffee of very high micro lot quality, especially from Wheeler, where the two lots we sent to you all are from. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and they're doing a great job. They're going to have so much really high quality coffee, and I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to find a home for it. So I think it might kind of be the opposite. I
Hmm.
hope that there's the folks are still roasting these very high quality microlots and not changing that sourcing strategy. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, given I'm aware that people will hopefully come out and not go out, stay in and be watching this. Is there anything I've missed? Is there anything any points you want to get across um, about the work you do and the farmers? I know, I would love to, if we had time and people would sit for a couple of hours and listen to this and watch this. I would, love to dive into the individual stories of all the coffees we have. You told me a little bit about Umberto and his current his story. It's pretty sad, but yeah. Are there anything you want to get across? Things like that.
I can't think of
Okay.
anything major that we've missed here, but I guess just let everyone know that I'm here in Pereira most of the time at an office. I'm always around. If anyone has questions, any specific questions about how things are being run, we're an open book. I believe in radical transparency, and yeah, anything that folks want to know, any support we can offer, because we operate vertically, because we're a farmer group, we have access to these individuals and a lot of information all the time. Like I said, there are no secrets. So if there's any way that from this end we can support what you all are doing at Langdon, as well as each individual roaster, how they're telling the story, how they're communicating this information and showing what's going on behind the scenes. We're more than happy to do whatever we can to create media and support those efforts.
So one thing you could definitely do for me was you could teach me some pronunciations.
We can do it.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we'll exchange a couple of emails afterwards.
If this
Of
lockdown carries on a lot longer, we could just start a whole coffee Spanish course
Yeah,
here.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because I've obviously tasting the coffees with a few different people now, I'm aware that I'm butchering some hardworking people's names.
I don't
Um,
think they mind.
okay, good. Well, thank you very much, Carl, for joining us. And um, I know I speak on behalf of everyone at Langdon's when we say we're really excited to bring the coffee to the UK, and to get out there, and hopefully, in the not too distant future, everyone can get together and we can taste with each other again. That'd be great.